Two white officers stopped Marcia Wilson on the road, unaware that they were confronting their new boss, a black woman who, from day one, had been ready to challenge a system built on bias. Their brazen and racist questions weren't just an insult to her, but a stark reminder of the very thing she was there to fight in this city. However, when she revealed her true position, their expressions shifted. They realized that this day would change their lives. What happened next would shock even those who had seen it all. But let's take it one step at a time. Marcia Wilson nervously gripped the steering wheel as she drove into the new city. Today was her first day as the chief of police, and although it should have been a celebratory occasion, she felt tense. After fighting through years of racial discrimination, she knew that her new appointment wouldn't be welcomed by everyone. The city she was heading to was known for its conservative views, and many in the police force had openly expressed dissatisfaction with her arrival. When the lights of a patrol car flashed ahead, Marcia instinctively tensed up. She was being pulled over. Two white officers stepped out of their car and slowly approached her. One of them, the senior officer, gave her car a dismissive glance. The younger officer immediately started with a suspicious question. "Where are the vehicle papers?" Marcia silently handed over her license and registration. The officers exchanged quick glances, a sense of habit in their behavior. They seemed certain of their righteousness and complete control of the situation. "Did you violate something?" asked the senior officer, his tone already containing notes of judgment. "You know, this area isn't the safest for people like you, right?" Marcia felt anger boiling up inside, but worked to remain calm. She knew that every emotion she displayed would be put under a microscope. She understood that this wasn't just a routine stop, but a demonstration of power based on prejudice. Suppressing her frustration, she closely watched the officers' every move. They continued to inspect her documents, dragging out the time as if intentionally trying to make her uncomfortable. The young officer, finding nothing suspicious, still wasn't ready to back down. "What's your purpose in being in this area?" His voice sounded insistent, almost provocative. Marcia knew that the situation was slipping out of the bounds of professionalism. These officers were determined to find something that would give them a reason to detain her, but she couldn't afford to give them that chance. Her heart was pounding, but she maintained her composure. "I'm on my way to work," she replied shortly. The young officer squinted, not satisfied with that answer. "And what kind of work do you do, if you don't mind me asking?" His question sounded like a challenge. Marcia paused, studying their faces. She had a strong urge to tell them the truth right there, to put an end to this farce. But something held her back. It was her first day on the job, and she didn't want to start with a confrontation with her subordinates. Instead, she calmly replied, "You'll find out soon enough." The senior officer, sensing that the situation was becoming awkward, stepped forward. "All right, that's enough." His tone was rough, as if he wasn't taking her seriously. "We could detain you for further questioning." This statement hit a nerve in Marcia. She knew she had every right to her freedom, but their arrogance and confidence in their own impunity fueled her anger. An internal conflict was building. Should she reveal her position now, or let them go further? Marcia took a deep breath, deciding that her patience had run out. She looked the senior officer in the eye, realizing that she could no longer allow this situation to unfold according to their plan. "That's enough," she said, her voice firm but calm. "I'm your new boss, Captain Marcia Wilson." Both officers froze. Their eyes widened in surprise, and their faces reflected complete confusion. For a moment, silence filled the air, thick with unease and bewilderment. The younger officer didn't immediately grasp what had happened, but the senior officer instantly realized the gravity of the situation. You're the chief?" the senior officer stammered, his confidence evaporating in an instant. Yes, and I'd like to know why you stopped me and why this pointless interrogation continues, Marcia continued, not breaking eye contact. The younger officer was still confused, but the senior officer, now fully understanding the predicament they were in, hurriedly tried to find the right words. I'm sorry, Captain. This was a mistake, a misunderstanding. His voice was now significantly softer, almost apologetic. A misunderstanding? Marcia paused, letting them grasp the absurdity of the situation. Or is this an example of how you treat citizens based on their appearance? The officers realized they had nowhere left to retreat. The senior officer tried to justify himself, but each argument sounded weaker, while the younger officer saw clearly now that their actions weren't driven by duty, but by bias. Marcia wasn't going to let them off easily. She felt that this moment could be a turning point not only for these officers, but for the entire department. Her voice remained calm, but firm. I don't need apologies. I need to understand why the system you represent finds it acceptable to stop Black citizens without cause. She emphasized each word. How often does this happen? How many people like me have been stopped simply because they didn't fit your idea of who should be driving this car? The officers were silent, unable to respond. They understood that in front of them stood not just a new boss, but someone who fully grasped their methods. You'll be reporting to me during the first week about every vehicle you stop, Marcia continued, and I'll thoroughly review how closely your approach aligns with the law and professional standards. The younger officer appeared completely deflated. The senior officer, realizing the seriousness of the situation, tried to collect himself, but his voice still trembled. We'll do everything as you said, Captain. We didn't realize. That's the biggest problem, Marcia interrupted him. You don't even realize what you're doing. She left them standing there as she got back into her car. Steadying herself, she started the engine and drove off, leaving them to reflect on their actions. But her work was far from over. Later that day, Marcia gathered all the officers for her first meeting. She knew that change in the system had to start from the top. In front of the entire team, she recounted what had happened and made it clear that such methods would no longer be tolerated. She didn't blow it into a scandal, but she made sure they knew that things would be different from now on. Every officer in the precinct would have to understand their responsibility in how they treated citizens, regardless of their race or social status. The story quickly spread throughout the community. For some, it was a sign of change. For others, a warning. The media picked up the news, and Marcia became a symbol of the fight for justice and change in the system. She knew that much work lay ahead, but this first step was crucial. Now she understood that her position wasn't just a title, but an opportunity to make life better for those who had long suffered from injustice.